Greetings, you're with me, Philomena Pragasam, on Connect with AIBD. And today we are talking to a bold and most fascinating public personality. I'm saying not just in Malaysia, but he's known the world over. He has played a most influential role in shaping modern Malaysia. I'm speaking to none other than His Excellency, Tun Dr Mahathir Mohammad. Tun Dr Mahathir Mohammad, welcome to TV AIBD. It's such an honor meeting you, even though virtually. Hello.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm honored and privileged to be speaking with you and make sure that all my colleagues, should be meeting this very eminent gentleman. I'm awed by the way you speak. I've been watching all your videos. So Tun, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the process of nation building. We're going into the 64th Independence Day celebrations. It's been a long road from 1957. And you yourself, you're known as the father of modern Malaysia. Tell me, how has the journey been at the time when you've been in politics for more than 70 years? How has it been? Some of your experiences, Tun?
It has been satisfactory at times, but at times it's very, depressing because things that I thought should be done were not done. The performance of a country depends very much on the leadership. And the leader has to be given power to do what he has to do. But power can be abused. As they say, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So when a leader is given power and he abuses that power, then of course the country suffers. Actually, the development of a country is quite simple. You do what people think you should do. That's all. I mean, people want the country to prosper. People want the country to give a good life for them. And you can do this. But when you have a leader who is more interested in what he gets rather than what the nation gets, then of course the nation does not develop. So it is important that the leader should be focused on serving the country.
Well said, Tun. And indeed, you have served in the last tenure as the fourth Prime Minister of Malaysia for 22 years. And I'm awed with the fact that you were one of the very few world leaders who actually gave up the position at the peak of your career. That's such an admirable feat. What made you do that?
Well, I thought having served the country for more than 20 years through 5 elections, I thought it was time that somebody else, younger people, takes over. That was my first feeling, that you shouldn't be overstay your welcome. And I did hear people commenting, hey, when is this fellow going to go? So I thought that it was time for me to go because I felt that I had laid the foundation, and much of what needs to be done is to follow the way we develop the country. That was established mostly during my time. If you follow that system or policy, then the country will grow.
I think this is an interesting comment, but there can never be another Tun Dr Mahathir, right? I mean, who else to fit your shoes? I think that's a very, very difficult task because you had set such a high benchmark. And I doubt that any leader could ever reach that pinnacle of success that you did. Tun, you have done things like having a great vision for Malaysia. Even then, it's not just Malaysia. Even if you look at Vision 2020, it's not just a vision for Malaysia. You are the hero of developing nations. Look at the way you've reached out your popularity to countries, the South countries. We're looking at the African nations as well. All these people applaud Tun Dr Mahathir. Yeah, and what made you take that global stand? Asia is always so Eurocentric.
Well, I changed quite a lot of the mindset of Malaysians.
Mm.
We were Eurocentric. We were very much attached to the Commonwealth. But there are other countries which you can provide us with good models. So I began to look to the countries in the Far East, to Japan in particular, and later on to Korea and China and Taiwan, because these countries have achieved great progress. So if you confine yourself to looking at Europe, then actually Europe is, in a way, it is declining. It is not as dynamic as it was before. So it was the right time to choose a different model. And when we did this, we benefited. And of course, people noticed that Malaysia benefited much from its own way of doing things. And many people look at Malaysia now as a model. And they think that if Malaysia can do, they can do also. And it is quite correct. Everybody can do what Malaysia has done. But what is important, of course, is that the leadership should be interested in serving the country rather than serving himself.
You've said this quite a bit, serving the country instead of serving oneself. Now, politics is always looked at, I don't know about the politics of your time, but I think this is a global phenomenon. People want to be popular. People want to know what people are talking about them. And even if you look at politics today, I think at your time, Tun, you were basically known for your leadership and decision-making, bold decision-making process. But today, there's a lot of dependence on data, right? You look at data that's given, the prime minister is given data about what people are talking about him, all this stuff. So that's surely going to hamper your individual decision-making. What's your thought on that? So this is not just Malaysia, I'm talking about global leaders, right?
Yeah, data is important, but analyzing the data is more important. You get data, but some of the data will not help you, especially if you do not know how to make use of the data. But firstly, you must distinguish between data that leads to success and data that can result in failures. So if you know from experience what data to make use of, then you will succeed. And the other thing is that a leader must be satisfied with the end results, job satisfaction, so to speak. Now, if you are a leader of a country and the country declines, you should feel unhappy. But when a leader is looking for success of the country and that gives him satisfaction, then it is likely that the leader will succeed in making progress for his country.
Were you always sure that whatever decisions you made would lead to a positive outcome, Tun? I'm asking this. You just mentioned that, the end result is something that you need to know. How was it like for you? Did you know you were in an era of no data? Okay, so it was just probably political advisors. You were probably looking at some demographics, psychographics that were presented to you. But did you always know that something would be a success, or were you just a risk taker?
Well, some of the problems I faced were difficult to resolve. And when you make a decision to do something about it, you may succeed or you may fail. But I like to think that as a doctor, I use the doctor's way of diagnosing problems, diseases. I need to know the background, the history. I did the so-called physical examination, and then I will identify what the disease is all about, and then did identify what kind of medicine to give. I go through this process whenever I meet up with a problem. One of the worst problems we faced was the currency crisis.
Yes.
We need to go into the background why was this happening? And I concluded that this was artificially created by currency traders. Once you decide on that, you look for ways and means to paralyze them, to stop them from doing what they were doing. And in the end, we did find a solution to the problem. The approach is the approach of a doctor. I go into the history, I get all the evidence, I identify the causes, and then I analyze the causes and find which one of them is well, most affecting the situation most, and I tackle that problem.
So you've given the right medicine, I think, for the last 22 years as the fourth Prime Minister of Malaysia and the seventh. But indeed, this is the scientific aspect of you, because doctors, I think in the job as a doctor, you're not allowed to make a mistake because a mistake can cost a life. Right. So I guess that strength of, that dominant thing in you about the sciences is what allowed you to make correct decisions. A while ago, you mentioned about the economic crisis at that time. And, IMF, everyone was pushing for IMF packages, but you said no. Right, that's a very bold thing to do at that time. When the whole world was facing it, Indonesia was taking it. Everyone was like, "Why isn't he doing it? Why didn't you?"
Well, I look at the solution they provided. I analyze it, and I try to focus what would happen if I were to accept their advice. And I realized that they were not trying to solve the problem of Malaysia. They were trying to solve the problem of the debts of Malaysia. They want us to pay the debts. They're not interested in what happens to us, but we are interested in what happens to us. Yes, we must pay debts, but not at the expense of impoverishing our country. So once we decide that their solution would actually worsen the situation in our country, then we made the decision, no, we cannot accept their solution.
I think you made the right decision there, Tun. And you're a doctor, but yet I'm sure you had to go through your, banking and financial studies before you made such a decision. You're not one to take an advice just like that, right? You weigh your decision.
Yeah, during the time of the crisis, I select a number of people, not necessarily from the government, but also from outside. And this small group of people meet every morning. Every morning they meet, I chair the meeting, and we discuss what is current. We want to know what is happening and why it is happening. And then in the end, of course, we were looking for solutions. After studying it for quite some time and hearing the advice or the views of many people who are experts in their field. There are, of course, financiers, bankers, business people. They tell me, I wouldn't know because this is not my field, but they tell me that this is what is happening and why it is happening. Once in medicine, of course, once you diagnose the disease, then of course there comes the planning for the treatment. So once we recognize what was happening, that actually the currency traders were selling short. In other words, they were selling money they didn't have to bring down the value. And then, of course, when the value of the currency goes down, they buy and deliver to the people they had sold previously at a higher price. They were making money that way. So once we know that, we thought about how to stop that. And we found a way. And of course, that was the end of their game.
Fantastic, because at that time you even found about George Soros. I still remember, that name was predominantly everywhere because he played a crucial role. But like you said, this is about people who are trading, trading money, and you pegging, taking these kind of measures to stop actually stopped a lot of this trading as well. Okay, I'm just going to go a little bit to Malaysia's foreign policy. Tun, ASEAN has actually formed the cornerstone of Malaysia's foreign policy, but you're looking at it not just in terms of security. A lot of countries look at it as a security blanket, but for Malaysia, it has always been something for economic purposes as well. What are your comments on that, Tun?
Foreign policy started with our need to live with our neighbors. Mm-hmm. Our neighbors had claims on us, and there was confrontation and all that. What is the solution to that? We thought that confrontation is not a very positive thing. It doesn't yield any good. We had to find other ways of solving our problem, and we decided the best way is to sit around a table and discuss, for the heads of government to do that. And so it was that first it was Mafilindo, which was formed. It didn't work too well. And finally we came across ASEAN, where 5 countries decided that if we have problem with our neighbors, sit at a table and discuss and find solution. That was the beginning of Malaysia's foreign policy. But in addition to that, we were so very Western-oriented, very Eurocentric. We thought that we should change that. In fact, we downgraded the British Commonwealth, for example. Instead, we tried to make friends with countries which are small but useful. These small countries also carry 1 vote in the United Nations. So it's good to be friendly with them because they are much more grateful to you for what little you give them than the big countries. You can support big countries, but they are interested only in themselves. They are not interested in making friends. But making friends with small countries is very worthwhile, because then they are very willing to support you if there should be any contest. So the foreign policy was changed so that there is a downgrading of the Commonwealth, downgrading of the Eurocentrism, and more emphasis on doing our neighbors, the ASEAN neighbors, and the small countries of the Pacific, as well as looking at the East, at the successful countries of the East. So these are the things that influence the foreign policy of Malaysia during my time.
Fantastic, because yesterday, I think, was the 53rd anniversary of ASEAN, 53 years. That we've been, together with our neighbors. And like you said, the claims haven't ended. There's still a lot of disputes. It's bound to happen with neighbors. So I'm just going to ask you one more. It's like you actually spoke up. You said, we can't help being Eurocentric. I think the Europeans have always been conquerors, at least in this part of the world and also in many parts of Asia. So that is something that has happened. And the fact is, not everybody stood up. Not everybody voiced out at the UNGA. They did not say things. And we always have this mentality of, accepting. But you stood up, you made your voice be heard. And that's coming from a small country like Malaysia. I still remember people didn't know where was Malaysia at that time when I was abroad. And people said, Malaysia, Singapore? And I said, no, Malaysia is bigger than Singapore. I'm Malaysian, I'm not Singaporean. But the fact that people then realized about Malaysia, I think they owe it to you. You were the one who spoke up, this Mahathir.
We notice that many of the newly independent countries are too dependent upon the other countries, the richer countries. They need aid. They need to have certain special privileges for themselves given by the powerful countries. What Malaysia does is to just live within its means, not to borrow money too much and not to depend upon aid. When you depend upon aid, you become obliged to the aid giver. So Malaysia had little aid from others. I remember that the only aid we had at one time was 1 million US dollar provided by the US for the training of our officer corps. That's fine, but it's only 1 million. And at one time they threatened to take away that 1 million. I say you can take away. We don't depend upon your 1 million. So when you are not dependent upon people, then you are free to talk. You're free to criticize. So it is important that a country live within its means. It may not be very much, but we may be poor, but if you live within your means, you are obliged to no one. You are not borrowing money, you are not asking for aid.
This is really a very good advice. But today, I think many countries are already entering into the debt, especially with superpowers, a new superpower that has emerged. They've never been a conqueror. They've not conquered any country. But financially, many countries are getting indebted to this huge nation. And indeed, it's difficult. Now, so I want to bring back the subject of leadership. Because you said leaders have to be firm, leaders have to make decisions. Not all leaders are doctors like you, Tun. But the thing is, what is the core of leadership, right? Because today, if you look at the world, there have been many failed leaders. Even if you look at America, you look at so many countries, right? You hear of prime ministers being ousted, being taken out, you've presidents. What's happening with leadership today? What are leaders looking for?
You need authority. You need power to become a leader because you want to use the power to do what it is that you think is good, either for yourself or for your country. So firstly, all leaders must have power. But secondly, he must have a good moral, a moral system or value that rejects doing something that is obviously wrong. So a good leader must think of the people he leads, not of himself, the people he leads, the country he leads, and to find satisfaction, not through something personal given to you, but to find that what you set out to do for the people actually happens. You want the country to be rich and stable and peaceful, and you achieve that, you should feel satisfied with that, not with what you get. People will appreciate eventually. Of course, I've been called a dictator. I know I never bothered about that because all opposition must demonize the people they are against. So the opposition has labeled me as a dictator. And strangely, the same opposition later on chose me as their leader. Now, if they think I was a dictator, I was really a dictator, they wouldn't have chosen me. But they gave that label so as to bring me down when they were against me. But actually, I consulted people. I used the cabinet fully. I consult people outside the cabinet. I don't make a decision easily. I have to hear all the different angles before I make a decision. So it's not like a dictator who decides to do something and doesn't care what people say. I will do it. You see,
Absolutely.
I listen to people.
Yeah, that's very evident. And you also always call for a first-class mentality among Malaysians. I think that's the kind of Malaysian society that you envisaged during your time, Tun, and we can see the fruits of that. Malaysians have progressed globally. I think that's your vision as well. Yeah, your first class mentality focus that you had during that period of time when Malaysia was still in its pretty much infancy stage, I would say. Yeah. Okay. I want to ask you about fake news. You know, people always say if you talk to leaders today, the greatest fear that they have is social media. Now, you, for one, you started the Malaysian multimedia super corridor at that time. You know, it was a very visionary move. And then the internet came about and there were lots of criticisms. But today, you know, during this pandemic, we can see how important it is to have connectivity. Our schools are online and I'm working from home. All my colleagues are joining me from home, right? Because of the pandemic. And this is all possible because of someone's vision many years ago, right? And today we're enjoying the fruits of this, vision at that period when it was so new for Malaysia. I think you outbeat quite a lot of your neighbors in this. But today we are also facing such a thing as fake news. And leaders tell me, Philo, I'm scared about fake news. I remember meeting one minister and he said, I don't want to talk. This is a foreigner. He said, I don't want to talk about fake news. Please keep me out. There's so much. It's horrible. Were you having fake news at your time without social media, to add on to it? What do you think of this fake news stuff?
Well, I consider the kind of accusation level at me was not real. It's not based on any fact. Mm-hmm. They feel a need to demonize me. And for that, they try to promote news that is not true. But in those days, there was no social media. So they have to go through the press. The press have got editors and other people. The press needs to have license in Malaysia. So the ability to promote fake news was less in those days. And then, of course, came the social media, where the government just cannot stop people from saying and publishing whatever it is that they are thinking about. So the challenge becomes greater for the leader. He must be able to deal with fake news. How do we deal with fake news? By proving that what you do is for people to see. People can see what you do and can feel. Then they can reject fake news. So fighting against fake news, it's not just about saying, no, that is not true. You are telling lies, but that is not enough. You have to show that what they say is not true. So facts can counter fake news. Creating facts that can be seen can counter fake news. And of course, when I stepped down, social media was only beginning. But after I stepped down, of course, there was less attack on me, but then I made a comeback and again, the fake news came.
So you had a taste of what fake news is about in your second time as Prime Minister, the 7th Prime Minister of Malaysia. But you yourself, you're a blogger, Tun. You never stopped using social media as well. You are an ardent blogger and you've been communicating with Malaysians, giving advice where it's necessary, even when you step down. I think that you've always played a crucial role in Malaysian politics. And this is really exciting because we are looking today at a pandemic. If you were given the choice of how you would handle this, what would you do?
Yes, following the example of the first emergency in '69, when they set up the NOC, National Operations Council, to deal with the problem. The problem at that time was political, and Tun Razak headed that setup, and he solved the political problem. So I thought that setting up that kind of mechanism would also serve us this time, accepting that we are against a new thing, a pandemic of a scale that has never been seen by the whole world. We need to think why this thing is happening. How do we prevent them? But of course, you should do this thing very early. At the time when the scale was small, maybe a few hundreds a day, new cases, it's much easier to deal. But when you have 20,000 people, immediately you find yourself short-handed. You don't have the beds in the hospital. You cannot actually admit into hospital 20,000 people at a time every day. So the way to deal with the pandemic requires a lot of expertise by people who are knowledgeable about this area, the virologists, the people in the health services and all that. They are the right people. Politicians are not qualified to deal with a health problem. So that is why I suggested that there should be a body that is independent of the government, that is not interfered with by the government, that will look into the pandemic and find ways and means to reduce the number of new cases.
I think, well said. I think the real crisis right here in Malaysia, I would say, is the pandemic. And surely there's a call to do something about this. And it's not just going to be, vaccination, but it's more than that. So Tun, I applaud you on that initiative. I want to just go back a little bit to politics of Malaysia. And the question I have for you is, during the first tenure, you were in a Malaysia that was, the basic setup of the three parties, MCA, MIC, UMNO, and then you have the opposition. But so Malaysians were ethnic-centric. The parties were ethnic-centric. But when you look at today's politics, are Malaysians really interested in that? Because you see people supporting, a person from a different group will support another leader, even though it's not of their own racial makeup. Somehow, I think Malaysians are coming to that. So the relevance of parties according to the ethnic groups, I don't see much relevance today. What's your take on that, Thun?
Well, in Malaysia, we tend to divide ourselves based on our origins. We preserve our identification with the country of our origins. And when you do that, you separate people. And people do not think just as Malaysians, but you are Chinese Malaysian, Indian Malaysian, Malay Malaysian, and all that. And when you do that, of course, people tend to depend upon race in order to get support. If you have a multiracial party, it will have some support, but it will never win. You may have noticed this, that when the opposition decided that they should come together, form a coalition, they couldn't win. They couldn't win. Several times they attempted, they couldn't win. Until the Malays feel that they have a stake there. That is why when Bersatu joined, they were able to win. Bersatu was a small party, and yet it overcame the fear of the Malays. So they now support. But again, unfortunately, after we won and set up a good government, the new opposition, the former BN, started playing on race. They talk about Malay Muslim government. Of course, the Pakatan Harapan is a multiracial government. When they play on Malay Muslim sentiments, a lot of Muslims supported that, including those from my party. That is why people from my party decided to leave Pakatan Harapan, brought it down, and form a new party, which was able to create the backdoor government. So the feeling of race is still there. If you disregard it completely, you will not win. The opposition tried to disregard it. They never they never could win. But even when they have succeeded, the appeal to racial sentiment was able to undermine the government of Pakatan Harapan.
Well, that's a long road to go. We're 64 years since independence, and we're still in that very much same mold that we started off. So it's a wait and see game for Malaysia. Tun, tell me, how would you like to be remembered by Malaysians? You just celebrated your 96th birthday, right? But you don't look very much different from the last pictures. You're still looking young and so chirpy this morning. How would you like Malaysians to remember you?
I used to tell people that I don't care how people remember me, because I know that after I'm dead and gone, lots of people will debunk a lot of things said about me, because that is normal. People will write books saying, although he was supposed to do this, but actually he was a crook, he was a corrupt person. And, recently on social media, I was surprised to find that they regarded me as one of the richest leaders in the world.
Wow.
And they showed a picture of my house. They haven't gone into my house. They took a picture from outside. I don't live in a palace. I live in an ordinary house, but nobody knows. So when you are dead and gone, people will say things about you. So I really don't care, because I won't be around to feel the sting of what they say about me.
Well, that's a very interesting way of putting it, right? So you won't be around. So the thing is, I think people automatically become angels after they're gone. So I doubt anyone's going to say anything about you with all the iconic stuff that you started, the Twin Towers. You're going to be a name which is just going to go on and on in Malaysian history. I didn't ask you, do you have any more ambition?
No, I just want to see this country develop and grow, become prosperous again. Anything I can do to help, I think I shouldn't be selfish and think about myself. I must think about the country.
With all the stress of being a leader, like not once but twice, and then looking at all the demonic demonization that goes on, I really think that you are a very strong person. Nothing is going to beat Tun Mahathir. Right. So yeah. So Tun, I want to say thank you to you. It's indeed a privilege to be talking to you today. I'm really happy that I've had the chance to speak with you and hear out your side of how great leadership can be, and the success of Malaysia's foreign policies and nation building. Thank you so much, Tun, for being on TV AIBD.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
And all the best to you, in your endeavors.